Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to Force StarCraft 2 Strategy, your number one location for step-by-step strategy and tutorial videos. Today we're going to be taking a look at a Protoss strategy. This is going to be a Protoss versus Protoss or mirror matchup strategy. In this particular replay, our Protoss player is Reen and our Protoss opponent is Insolence. So basically what we're going to be looking at are a lot of PvP games or Protoss versus Protoss games end up in the scenario where both players go for warp gate and both players try to warp units inside or around the opponent's base and then just try to go from there, teching up to immortals if necessary. And yeah, I mean, that's typically a lot of what you see. Also, seeing a lot of two-gate pressure, just basically attempting to take out your opponent early is basically what's in the metagame. It's what's been pretty popular as of late. But what we're going to actually be taking a look at here is just kind of a reactionary playstyle to our Protoss opponent and how that can be beneficial for you. Basically, what we're going to end up doing is we're going to scout out our opponent, we're going to see what he's doing, we're going to respond in turn with our own strategy. So just starting off with the basic build, however, with that 9 Pylon followed up by that 12 Gateway. We are, of course, going to be dropping an Assimilator after that, preparing to get ready to get a Cybernetics Core and tech up from there. And we are, of course, going to need gas to get that Warp Gate tech. But just starting off with this one gateway for the time being, and then waiting until we get our scouting information to decide what we're going to do from there. There goes the Assimilator at 15. Now, here we are, moving up into our opponent's base, and what we see is he's got 2 gateways right now. That threat there of a 2-gate push is pretty scary for us, so we will in turn respond by dropping another gateway ourselves. As you can see here, 2nd gateway going up. Basically, the thing is, if we'd gone straight for the Cybernetics Core and just been producing out of this one gateway, we would be incredibly vulnerable to a 2-gate Zealot push. Basically, he's obviously going to be able to create units twice as much as we are going to be able to create, and we would be in a very vulnerable spot. So we have to respond by getting that 2nd gateway in seeing that our opponent has 2 gateways. But we can use to our advantage the fact that we get that a little later and that we're going to be able to get our Cybernetics Core a little faster. Now we're going to be dropping that pretty shortly. We are, of course, going to try to bolster our front defense here. We need some Zealots up front to ward off anything we're going to be seeing. As you can see, we're still in our opponent's base. There's really no reason to leave up until the point that he gets a Stalker out, or up until the point that the Zealots catch up to you, because the Zealots aren't going to be able to catch up to your Marine unless they kind of surround him and pin him in some manner. So up until the point that you see Stalkers, you can keep your scout in their base, keep getting that vital information. Here you go, we are dropping that Cybernetics Core now. And as you can see, our opponent does not have one yet. We still have the scout, we're still moving around. So we are at disadvantage now. We're going to be able to get that Warp Gate tech up faster than our opponent. But again, we're still vulnerable. We still need to make sure we create Zealots at the front of our base, because if he does choose to move out, which he is here, had we not created that 2nd gateway and had we not had that extra production available to us, he would have been able to overrun the amount of Zealots that we did have. So again, that's kind of why this reactionary play is important in any mirror matchups, really. Changing your strategy based on what your opponent's doing. I mean, that's the truth in any matchup, but particularly in mirror matchups, it's vital that you are able to see what your opponent's doing and respond likely. Because there is, you guys have the exact same capabilities, so you need to make sure that you're responding properly to whatever they're doing. So we are getting that Warp Gate research up right now, dropping our 3rd and 4th gateway shortly thereafter. Now we're going to push out with the Zealots that we have. We're going to try to test the front waters and see what we can do. We still have not seen the Cybernetics Core. It is in fact going up now. We did see this Forge, however. So basically what our opponent's attempting to do is try to save himself from making too many units by dropping a cannon down. Unfortunately, you do have to dump a lot of resources into that, because you do have to have enough resources to make the Forge and then to place the cannon as well. Now we did drop a proxy pylon in our base. We were attempting, again, what I was saying before, we were attempting to do that trick by having a pylon in our opponent's base and warping in units that way. Obviously that didn't work. He did spot it and he was able to take it out. So here we are attempting to move up. This choke's going to prevent us from pushing in with this cannon behind it. As soon as it warps in, that's basically when we're going to have to pull back, because all he really has to do is pull Zealots forward, and with the cannon fire, it's going to take out our units pretty quickly. But we did test the front gate. We are basically aware at this point that we are very unlikely to be able to push in anytime soon. And basically how we're going to respond is by getting a robotics facility, and then we're going to be getting our little dropship, our little fun, happy dropship. And we're going to be using that. We're going to be using the pylon power to either warp in units or just using the ability to drop units into his base. Because basically what we're attempting to do is go for some mineral harassment, go for some base harassment, all the while defending our base from any push from our Protoss opponent. Doing a good job up here of keeping some sort of unit on this Delnago tower to see if he does move out of his base with anything. And yeah, I mean, at this point, basically, we're just waiting for the robotics facility. We obviously have both assimilators up at this point, keeping them fully saturated. Robotics facility is just not coming out. Now, we are going to start out with an observer before we go ahead and get our Warp Prism. We're just going to start with the observer to continue to get that scouting information, to see what they're doing, and to make sure that getting this Warp Prism and dropping in their base is going to be effective. Now, we did see them pushing forward there. I'll go back 10 seconds just to show you. We did see them pushing forward there, so what we're going to do is we're going to move our probe out. There's no reason to lose it unnecessarily, and just move it down to the second Zelnaga tower so you can see when they advance even further. Warping in some units for defense again, because we did see that there. What you're also going to want to do is get up a sentry, and this is going to allow you to use that force field ability to block any units from getting inside of your base. Again, here they are. We see them advancing. We know that they're likely to be striking us soon. They've moved this far in advancement. They obviously plan on hitting us sometime soon. Getting ready, prepared for that attack. Here we are. The Warp Prism is just about finished right now. So what we're going to do at this point is we're going to warp into Sentry. This is going to be vital to our defense of our base. And then we're also going to warp in some Zealots, and we're basically going to be lifting them off and bringing them to our opponent's base. We did move that observer we created inside. We did see that they have very little in defense right now. And again, as you can see, they are poking forward. So this is a vital point. Basically, what we need to do is we need to try to keep them out of our base with these force fields. It's too early in the game for him to have blink for those stalkers yet, so we don't really have to worry about that. And all the while, we're trying to do as much harassment inside of his base as possible. As you can see, we did drop those Zealots, forcing those probes away from the line, and we're going to start picking off this Nexus. And now what we're also going to do is go ahead and use that Pylon power from this Warp Prism to have the option of warping in more units if necessary. So here we are defending our base, dropping that force field, stopping those stalkers from being able to come in, and picking off his Zealots as well. Basically, we waited until Zealots came in, dropped the force field then, and basically forced them to stay inside of our base so we can pick them off. So at this point, he is stuck outside of our base until he gets that blink and has vision up here that he can't move in at all. And we do decide, since he is continuing with this advancement, to warp into our base. Now, had he pulled back, had he gone back to defend, what we could have done at that point is just used our Warp Prism and used the Pylon power to warp units into his base to continue this harassment and this attack. So that's why this can be very effective, making use of that Warp Prism, or as I called it earlier, that fun little happy dropship. Making use of this when you're unable to break through the front of his base and when you don't have a proxy pylon inside of his base. This can be a very effective tool. I don't see enough people using these as dropships lately. In fact, many games I've watched where people don't even get this. The Warp Prism is just completely neglected. Definitely a very useful tool. I would suggest taking advantage of it, mainly because, again, not a lot of people are using it, so likely your opponent isn't going to be expecting any sort of a Warp Prism drop or warp in. So yeah, I mean, take advantage of that fact. Take advantage of people not being prepared for situations. So again, going over the build order, going over how this strategy looked, started off with pretty standard stuff by getting that 9 pylon and that 12 gateway. We then waited to get our Cybernetics Core, or our second gateway, until we had our scouting information. Now, we saw those 2 gateways. We realized with that he was likely to push out with Zealots, and we had to, in fact, get our second gateway at that point. I'll say once more, if you had not gotten that second gateway and he pushed out with those 2 gateway Zealot push just compared to your 1 gateway, you would not have enough to defend against it, and he would take you out early. So that reactionary play is very important, again, in this mirror matchup, because of the fact that you guys have the exact same capabilities. Now, in dropping that later gateway, we were able to get our Cybernetics Core a little bit sooner, just because of that slight mineral advantage there. So we dropped down our Cybernetics Core, we started researching that warp gate as soon as possible, and then, of course, seeing that after we tested the front here, seeing that we were unable to push inside of his base and that we lost our proxy pylon and we were no longer able to warp inside of his base, we went ahead, we got that Warp Prism, used it as a dropship while he attacked, while he was pushing out against us. And then, of course, we had those sentries to do the force fields, which was the reason we were able to stay alive against that push. So make sure sentry is very important up until the point that he gets blink stalkers and has vision. You want to use those sentries to keep him outside of your base, and then go ahead with that counterattack. So yeah, guys, again, this has been for StarCraft 2 Strategy, your #1 location for step-by-step strategy and tutorial videos. If you guys like what we're doing here and you like what you see, please do go ahead and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Keep watching and keep owning, guys. Now he's going to be moving forward with these Marauders, which they can obviously do a lot of damage to the Stalker, so we're basically just going to want to do some good micro, try to pick him off as much as possible. We're forcing him to run back by chasing him with the Zealot, and then while he's running away, we're picking him off with the Stalker. If that Zealot wasn't there...